The cassette player clicked to life with a mechanical wheeze, its ancient speakers crackling like dry leaves underfoot. Detective Sarah Chen pressed her fingers against her temples, feeling the familiar throb of another sleepless night as the voice emerged from decades-old static. My name is Father Marcus Delacroix, and I am recording this confession on October 15th, 1987. What I'm about to tell you will damn my soul. But the weight of silence has become unbearable. Sarah had found the box of tapes 3 days ago, buried beneath moldy evidence files in the basement of Millbrook Police Station. 17 cassettes, each labeled with dates spanning from 1987 to 1989. Discovered during the renovation of what used to be the old interrogation room. No one could explain how they'd been overlooked for 35 years. The priest's voice continued, thick with an accent Sarah couldn't quite place. French, maybe, or something from the Bayou country down south. I came to St. Agatha's Parish in Millbrook to escape my past, but the past has a way of following men like me. The children here trusted me. Their parents trusted me. God forgive me, I betrayed them all. Sarah leaned forward, her coffee growing cold as the confession unfolded. Outside her office window, the October rain drummed against the glass with increasing intensity, as if the storm itself was listening. There are bodies, Detective, 7 of them. I know because I put them there. The tape hissed and popped, and Sarah held her breath until the voice returned. But I want you to understand something. I didn't kill those children. Someone else did that. Someone who made me watch. Someone who made me help. Someone who's still out there. Sarah's hand trembled as she reached for the pause button. In her 12 years with Millbrook PD, she'd worked missing persons cases, domestic violence, even a few homicides. But nothing like this. 7 children, dead for over 3 decades. And according to the church records she'd pulled yesterday, Father Marcus Delacroix had simply vanished from St. Agatha's in November 1989, leaving behind only a note saying he'd been called to serve elsewhere. She pressed play again. I'm recording these tapes because I know I'm going to die soon. He's found me again, you see. The man who made me his accomplice. The man who destroyed those innocent lives while I stood frozen in terror. I can feel him watching me, just like before. But this time, I won't run. This time, I'll leave behind the truth. The priest's voice broke, and Sarah could hear him weeping. The first child was Emily Morrison, 8 years old. Blonde hair in braids, always wore a yellow sundress to Sunday service. She disappeared on June 12, 1987, walking home from the church summer program. The police searched for weeks. They never found her body because I helped hide it in the old cemetery, beneath the mausoleum of the Blackwood family. Sarah grabbed her notepad, scribbling frantically. Emily Morrison, June 1987. She'd have to check the missing persons files, see if the case was still open. But Emily wasn't the first to die. She was just the first I helped bury. The real first. Victim was my conscience, killed months earlier when I discovered what was happening in the church basement and chose to keep silent rather than face the truth. The tape clicked off abruptly, leaving Sarah alone with the rain and her racing thoughts. She ejected the cassette, noting it was labeled tape 1 of 17, the Morrison girl. Each tape apparently focused on a different victim. Her phone buzzed. A text from Captain Rodriguez. Chen, need you upstairs. We've got a situation. Sarah pocketed the tape and headed for the stairs, her mind still reeling from the priest's words. As she climbed toward the main floor, She couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching her from the shadows of the old building. But that was impossible. The basement had been empty for years. Captain Maria Rodriguez looked like she hadn't slept in days. Her usually pristine uniform was wrinkled, her graying hair pulled back in a hasty ponytail. She gestured toward the chair across from her desk without looking up from the file spread before her. "Tell me you've got good news, Chen, because I'm drowning in bad news over here." Sarah settled into the chair, the weight of the cassette tape heavy in her jacket pocket. "Depends on how you define good news. Captain, I found something in the basement, something that might relate to some old missing persons cases." Rodriguez finally looked up, her dark eyes sharp despite the exhaustion. "How old are we talking?" "Mid to late 80s. 7 cases, possibly connected." Sarah chose her words carefully. She wanted to verify the priest's claims before making any official reports. "I need access to the archived files from that period." "Christ. Sarah, we've got 3 active homicide cases and the mayor breathing down my neck about the drug problem on 5th Street. You want to dig up cases from before you were even born." I know it sounds crazy, but Rodriguez held up her hand. "Look, I trust your instincts. You've got the best clearance rate in the department. But I need you focused on current cases. Delegate this historical stuff to Patterson. He loves cold cases." Sarah shook her head. "This feels different, Captain. Personal. I can't explain it, but I need to handle this myself." Something in Sarah's tone made Rodriguez pause. She studied her detective's face, noting the dark circles under her eyes, the tension in her shoulders. "You look like hell, Chen. When's the last time you took a day off?" "I'll rest when this is solved." Rodriguez sighed, pulling a thick manila folder from her desk drawer. "Funny you should mention the 80s. This morning, construction crews working on the St. Agatha renovation project found something interesting in the basement wall. Human remains, small bones, child-sized. Sarah's blood turned to ice water. St. Agatha's. The old church on Maple Street. That's the one. The Archdiocese sold it to developers last month. They're converting it into luxury condos." Rodriguez slid the folder across the desk. "Me estimates the bones have been there for at least 30 years, maybe longer." Sarah opened the folder with trembling fingers. Crime scene photos showed a skeleton partially embedded in what looked like a brick wall, as if someone had built the wall around the body. The skull was small, delicate, definitely a child. "Any identification yet?" "Too early to tell, but here's the interesting part." Rodriguez pulled out another photo, this one showing a piece of yellowed fabric. "This was found with the remains. Looks like part of a dress. Yellow cotton. Emily Morrison, 8 years old. Always wore a yellow sundress to Sunday service." Sarah forced her voice to remain steady. "Have you contacted the families of missing children from that time period? That's where you come in. I need you to compile a list of potential matches. Start with local cases, then expand if necessary." Rodriguez leaned back in her chair. "No," I said, "delegate this to Patterson. But given the discovery at St. Agatha's, I'm making this your priority. Work with the Mayor's office, coordinate with the construction company, find out who this child was." Sarah stood to leave, clutching the folder against her chest. At the door, she paused. "Captain, what do you know about Father Marcus Delacroix?" Rodriguez frowned. "Never heard the name. Why?" "He was the priest at St. Agatha's in the 80s. Disappeared suddenly in 1989. Priests transfer parishes all the time. Chen doesn't necessarily mean anything suspicious, but Sarah could see the wheels turning in her captain's mind. The timing was too convenient to ignore. "I'll look into it," Rodriguez said finally. "You focus on identifying our victim." Sarah nodded and headed back to her office, her mind racing. The priest's confession was already proving accurate in disturbing ways. If he was right about Emily Morrison, then 6 more bodies were waiting to be found. And somewhere out there, the man who'd forced a priest to become an accomplice was still alive, still watching, still hunting. The Millbrook Public Library's microfiche room smelled like dust and forgotten secrets. Sarah hunched over the ancient viewing machine, scrolling through newspaper archives from June 1987. The headline she'd been searching for finally appeared on the screen. "Local girl missing. Search continues for Emily Morrison." The accompanying photo showed a gap-toothed smile and pigtails tied with yellow ribbons. 8 years old, just as the priest had said, according to the article. Emily had last been seen leaving St. Agatha's after summer Bible school on June 12th. She never made it home. Sarah printed the article and continued searching. Over the next 2 hours, she found 5 more missing children from the same time period, all connected to St. Agatha's Parish. Tommy Chen, age 7, disappeared July 1987. No relation to Sarah, despite sharing her surname. Maria Santos, age 9, vanished August 1987. The Patterson twins, David and Daniel, both age 6, went missing together in September 1987. Little Rebecca Walsh, age 5, disappeared October 1987. 6 children. The priest had mentioned 7 victims. Sarah continued searching but found no record of a 7th missing child from St. Agatha's during that time period. Her phone rang, interrupting her research. "Chen here, it's Rodriguez. Me fast-tracked the dental analysis on our St. Agatha's victim. We've got a positive identification." Sarah's pen hovered over her notepad. "Emily Morrison," a pause. "How did you know that?" "Lucky guess. I've been researching missing children from that era." Sarah chose not to mention the tapes yet. She needed more evidence before making that revelation. "Well, your research just became a murder investigation." Me found evidence of blunt force trauma to the skull. This little girl was killed before being walled up in that basement. Sarah felt sick. The priest's words echoed in her mind. "I didn't kill those children. Someone else did that. Someone who made me watch. Captain, I found 5 more missing children from the same time period, all connected to St. Agatha's. Jesus Christ, you think we're dealing with a serial killer. I think we're dealing with something worse than that." After hanging up, Sarah returned to the microfiche machine, but her concentration was shattered. Every shadow in the archive room seemed to move. Independently, every creak of the old building set her nerves on edge. She gathered her research and headed back to the station, the weight of 17 cassette tapes calling to her from her desk drawer. Back in her office, she locked the door and inserted the second tape into the player. The priest's voice emerged from the static, more strained than before. Tape 2 of 17, The Chen Boy. Tommy Chen disappeared on July 8, 1987. He was helping me reorganize the church library when he found something he shouldn't have seen. A photograph, a terrible photograph that proved what I'd been trying to deny. Sarah's breath caught. Another direct hit. Tommy started asking questions I couldn't answer without revealing the truth. So I called him, just as I'd been instructed. He came within the hour, moving through the shadows like death itself. I watched through the vestry window as he approached Tommy in the churchyard. I watched him place his hand on the boy's shoulder and lead him away. I watched, and I did nothing. The priest's voice dissolved into sobs. The boy trusted me. He called me Father Marcus, asked me to bless his rosary beads before he went home each day. And I betrayed that trust because I was too much of a coward to stand up to a monster. Sarah paused the tape, her hands shaking. She pulled up the missing persons report for Tommy Chen on her computer. The details matched perfectly. 7 years old, last seen at St. Agatha's. Disappeared July 8th, 1987. But there was something else, a detail that made her blood run cold. Tommy Chen had been her cousin. Sarah's father had mentioned him once, years ago. A distant relative who'd gone missing when Sarah was just a toddler. The family had moved away from Millbrook shortly after. Unable to bear the memories, she was investigating the murder of her own family member. The tape continued playing. I found Tommy's body 3 days later, hidden in the church basement behind the old furnace, the same place where I'd found the others. He made me help carry the small body to the cemetery, made me dig another grave in the shadow of the Blackwood mausoleum, made me say the prayers while he covered the boy with dirt. Sarah hit pause again, her vision blurring with tears of rage and grief. Tommy Chen, 7 years old. Her cousin, and somewhere out there, his killer was still alive. Sarah's apartment felt different when she arrived home that night, though she couldn't pinpoint why. The familiar creaks of the old Victorian seemed more pronounced, the shadows cast by her reading lamp more angular and threatening. She'd stopped at a Chinese takeout place on the way home, but the food sat untouched on her coffee table as she paced the living room. Her mind consumed by the priest's confessions, she'd listened to 4 more tapes before leaving the office, each one detailing another murdered child with devastating accuracy. Maria Santos found exactly where the priest claimed. The Patterson twins, buried side by side in the old cemetery. Each confession matched the missing persons reports perfectly, down to the smallest details. But it was Tommy Chen's tape that haunted her most. Her cousin, a boy she'd never really known but whose death had shaped her family's history in ways she was only now beginning to understand. The rational part of her mind insisted she should call Captain Rodriguez, turn over the tapes, and let the full weight of the department's resources handle the investigation. But something held her back. The priest had recorded these confessions for a reason, and she sensed they weren't meant for bureaucratic processing. They were meant for someone who would understand the deeper horror of what had happened. Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Stop listening to the tapes. Sarah stared at the screen, her blood turning to ice. She checked. The timestamp the message had been sent just moments ago. She typed back, "Who is this?" No response. She tried calling the number, but it went straight to a disconnected line message. Sarah double-checked her locks, drew the curtains, and settled into her desk chair with her laptop. If someone knew she had the tapes, they were either watching her or had access to information they shouldn't have. She spent the next hour researching Father Marcos Delacroix, but found frustratingly little information. He'd arrived at St. Agatha's in early 1987, just months before the first child disappeared. Before that, his trail went cold. No seminary records, no previous parish assignments, no background that she could verify. It was as if Father Marcus Delacroix hadn't existed before 1987. Another text arrived. Some secrets should stay buried. This time, Sarah screenshot the message before typing her response. 7 children deserve justice. The reply came immediately. 8 children. You miscounted. Sarah's fingers froze over the keyboard. 8 children. The priest had mentioned 7 victims, and she'd found 6 missing persons reports. What was she missing? Her laptop chimed with an email notification from an address she didn't recognize. Temporal Witness, 1987, at protonmail.com. The subject line read, "The 8th child." Against her better judgment, Sarah opened the email. It contained a single attachment, a newspaper clipping from November 1989, 3 months after the last recorded disappearance. The headline read, "Priest found dead in Bayou, County. Father Marcus Delacroix, formerly of St. Agatha's Parish in Millbrook, was discovered deceased in a remote cabin outside Lafayette, Louisiana. Local authorities report the death appears to be suicide, though the investigation remains ongoing. Father Delacroix had been missing from his parish for several days before his death." Sarah's heart pounded as she read the article. The priest was dead, had been dead for 35 years. So who had recorded the confession tapes? She scrolled down and found a second attachment, a death certificate for Marcus Delacroix, dated November 15th, 1989, cause of death, self-inflicted gunshot wound, but the tapes in her desk were dated through December 1989, a full month after the priest's death. Sarah grabbed the box of cassettes and examined the labels more carefully. Most were dated from 1987 and 1988, but the final tape was labeled Tape 17 of 17. The final confession, December 23rd, 1989. If Father Delacroix died in November 1989, who had recorded the December tape? Her phone rang, startling her so badly. She nearly dropped it. The caller ID showed only a number, not the same one that had been texting her. Detective Chen. Her voice was steadier than she felt. "You shouldn't have found those tapes." The voice was deep, gravelly, with the faint trace of an accent she couldn't place. Not the priest's voice from the recordings. Who is this? Someone who's been waiting a very long time for this conversation. Those children died because they saw something they shouldn't have seen, just like you're seeing things you shouldn't see. Sarah's hand moved instinctively toward her service weapon. "Are you threatening me?" A low chuckle. "I'm warning you." The priest tried to expose the truth, and look what happened to him. Some secrets are protected by more than just silence. Detective Chen. The line went dead. Sarah immediately called the station's tech department and requested a trace on both phone numbers, knowing it was probably futile. Whoever was watching her was too careful to use traceable communications. She double-checked her locks again, then returned to her desk and inserted the final tape into the player. If someone didn't want her to hear these confessions, then she needed to hear them more than ever. The voice that emerged from the speakers wasn't Father Delacroix's. It was someone else entirely. The voice on the 17th tape was young, frightened, and very much alive. Sarah recognized the cadence immediately. It was the same accent as the priest's, but higher in pitch and trembling with terror. "My name is Michael Delacroix, and I'm the nephew of Father Marcus. If you're hearing this, it means Uncle Marcus is dead, and I'm probably next." Sarah grabbed her notepad, scribbling frantically as the young man continued. "Uncle Marcus gave me these tapes before he died. He said if anything happened to him, I should mail them to the police. But I was scared. I was only 16, and the man who killed those children was still out there, still watching, so I hid the tapes and ran." The recording paused, and Sarah could hear the boy crying. "I've been running for 35 years, detective. changing my name, moving from city to city, always looking over my shoulder. But I'm tired of running, and I'm dying. Cancer, the doctors say. I have maybe 3 months left. So, I'm coming. Back to Millbrook to tell you the truth, to give you the name of the man who destroyed so many lives. Sarah's pulse quickened. A living witness. Someone who could provide the missing pieces of the puzzle. His name is Dr. Edmund Blackwood. He's a psychiatrist who worked with troubled children in the 80s. But what nobody knew was that he was collecting them, studying them, killing them when they became inconvenient. Uncle Marcus discovered his secret by accident and tried to stop him. That's why he had to die. Dr. Edmund Blackwood. Sarah immediately thought of the cemetery where the children were buried, the Blackwood Mausoleum. Was it a coincidence, or had the killer been hiding his victims in his own family's resting place? Dr. Blackwood made Uncle Marcus help him dispose of the bodies. He said if my uncle tried to expose him, he'd claim that the priest was the real killer. Who would believe a foreign priest over a respected American doctor? Uncle Marcus was trapped, forced to participate in horrors that destroyed his soul. The young man's voice broke again. But there was an 8th child, detective. One you won't find in any missing persons report, because Dr. Blackwood was more careful by then. A little girl named Sophie Brennan. She was one of his patients, a foster child with no family to miss her. He killed her in December 1989, just weeks after Uncle Marcus died. I know because I saw it happen. Sarah felt her blood turn to ice. An 8th victim, one who'd fallen through the cracks of the system. I was hiding in the church that night, trying to find the courage to mail Uncle Marcus's tapes to the police. Dr. Blackwood came looking for them, and he brought the girl with him. Sophie, she couldn't have been more than 6 years old. When she saw the basement where the other children had died, she started screaming. So he killed her right there, right in front of me. Strangled her with his bare hands. Sarah had to pause the tape, her hands shaking too badly to write. The detail was too vivid, too specific to be fabricated. I managed to escape that night, but I couldn't save Sophie. I couldn't save any of them. I've lived with that guilt every day since. But now I'm dying, and I want to make it right. I'm coming back to Millbrook, detective. I'm going to show you where Sophie is buried, and I'm going to give you everything. You need to bring Dr. Blackwood to justice. The tape ended with a mechanical click, leaving Sarah alone with the weight of 8 murdered children and a killer who'd evaded justice for 35 years. She immediately ran a search for Dr. Edmund Blackwood. To her amazement, he was still alive, 83 years old, and residing in an upscale assisted living facility just outside Millbrook. According to his online profile, he'd retired from his psychiatric practice in 1995 and had spent his golden years as a respected philanthropist and community leader. The perfect cover for a monster. Sarah's phone buzzed with another text from the unknown number. Michael Delacroix died in a car accident 3 days ago in Louisiana. There are no more witnesses, Detective Chen. Let the dead rest. But this time, Sarah was ready. She'd already contacted the tech department, and they'd been monitoring her phone for incoming messages. Within minutes, they'd traced the text to a cell tower just 2 miles from her apartment. Someone was very close. Someone who'd been watching her all along. Sarah grabbed her service weapon and badge, her mind made up. She was going to pay Dr. Edmund Blackwood a visit tonight, before he had a chance to disappear, like so many others had over the decades. As she headed for the door, her landline rang. She almost ignored it, but something made her answer. Detective. Chen, yes. This is Sunset Manor, Assisted Living. I'm calling about Dr. Edmund Blackwood. I'm afraid there's been an incident. Sunset Manor sat on a hill overlooking Millbrook like a benevolent fortress. Its manicured grounds and colonial architecture designed to suggest peace and dignity in one's final years. But as Sarah pulled into the circular driveway, emergency, vehicles painted the scene in harsh reds and blues, shattering any illusion of tranquility. Dr. Patricia Wells, the facility's director, met Sarah at the main entrance. She was a small woman in her 50s, with graying hair and the efficient manner of someone accustomed to managing crises. Detective Chen, thank you for coming so quickly. I'm afraid Dr. Blackwood passed away this evening, quite suddenly. Sarah's heart sank. What happened? Heart attack, it appears. His aide found him in his room around 9 p.m. The paramedics tried to resuscitate him, but he'd been gone for some time. They walked through the facility's marble lobby, past worried residents clustered in wheelchairs and walkers, whispering among themselves. Sarah noted the expensive artwork on the walls, the crystal chandeliers, the Persian rugs. This was where Millbrook's elite came to die in comfort. Was Dr. Blackwood ill? Sarah asked as they took the elevator to the 3rd floor. Not particularly. He was 83, of course, but quite sharp mentally, very active in our community activities. He organized our weekly discussion groups and helped several residents with their memoirs. Dr. Wells paused. May I ask why the police are interested? In his death, it seemed quite natural to us. Sarah chose her words carefully. Dr. Blackwood's name came up in connection with a historical case we're investigating. Some missing children from the 1980s. Dr. Wells' face tightened almost imperceptibly. I see. Well, I'm sure that's some sort of mistake. Dr. Blackwood was a pillar of the community. He donated thousands of dollars to local children's charities over the years. They reached room 314 where the coroner's team was still processing the scene. Dr. Blackwood lay in his bed, eyes closed, looking peaceful. But Sarah noticed something that made her skin crawl, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth, as if he'd died knowing a secret joke. Dr. Wells, I'll need to examine Dr. Blackwood's personal effects. This is now part of an active investigation. Of course, Detective. Though I should mention that Dr. Blackwood was quite paranoid about his privacy. He had his room swept for listening devices monthly and insisted on handling his own mail. Sarah filed that information away as she began examining the room. It was spartanly furnished: a bed, a desk, a bookshelf filled with psychiatric journals and true crime novels. But hidden behind a false back in the desk drawer, Sarah found something that made her blood run cold. A manila envelope labeled insurance policy, in spidery handwriting. Inside were photographs, dozens of them, showing children in various stages of terror and pain. Sarah recognized some faces from the missing persons reports: Emily Morrison, Tommy Chen, the Patterson twins. But there were others too, children she didn't recognize, suggesting that the 8 victims were just the beginning. At the bottom of the envelope was a handwritten note. If you're reading this, then my heart has finally given out. A pity. I had hoped to live long enough to add Detective Sarah Chen to my collection. Yes, my dear detective, I know you've been listening to those tedious tapes. The priest was such a melodramatic fool, recording his guilt like some medieval he never understood that what we did was necessary. Those children had seen too much, learned too much about the true nature of power in this world. They had to be silenced. Sarah's hands trembled as she continued reading. But you've been useful, Detective Chen. Your investigation has helped me identify the last loose end. Young Michael Delacour. His car accident 3 days ago was no accident, I assure you. Now there are no witnesses left alive, save for you. And soon, that situation will be remedied as well. The note was dated today. Dr. Wells, Sarah called out, her voice tight with urgency. When exactly did Dr. Blackwood die? The aide found him around 9 p.m., but the coroner estimates he'd been dead for several hours. Why? Sarah checked her watch. It was now 11:30 p.m. If Dr. Blackwood had been dead since early evening, he couldn't have written a note dated today, unless... Dr. Wells, did Dr. Blackwood have any regular visitors? Family members? Close friends? Oh yes, his nephew visited quite regularly. Such a devoted young man. He was here just this afternoon, in fact. Sarah's blood turned to ice. His nephew? Yes. Dr. Jonathan Blackwood. He's a psychiatrist too. Follows in his uncle's footsteps. Runs a private practice here in town. Specializes in treating troubled children. The pattern was repeating itself. A new generation carrying on the family business, Sarah immediately called for backup and requested an APB on Dr. Jonathan Blackwood. But as she gave the dispatcher the details, she realized she had no description, no license plate number, no address for his practice. The nephew had been careful to remain invisible, just like his uncle. Her phone buzzed with a text. Room 314. Has excellent acoustics, Detective Chen. I've heard every word. Sarah spun around, scanning the room for hidden cameras or listening devices. The coroner's team looked at her strangely as she began checking behind picture frames and under furniture. Another text arrived. The game isn't over, Detective. In fact, it's just beginning. Those 8 children were practicing. I'm ready for the real hunt now. Sarah grabbed Dr. Wells by the arm. I need you to evacuate this facility immediately. Every resident, every staff member, get them out now. Detective, that's impossible. Many of our residents are bedridden. Others have dementia. Do it now, Sarah shouted, just as the lights went out. In the darkness, she could hear footsteps. In the hallway, slow, deliberate footsteps moving toward room 314. The hunter had become the hunted. The emergency lighting cast eerie red shadows throughout the hallway as Sarah drew her weapon. Motioning for Dr. Wells and the coroner's team to move toward the stairwell, the footsteps had stopped, but Sarah could feel a presence nearby, watching from the darkness. This is Detective Chen, she whispered into her radio. I need all available units at Sunset Manor, 3rd floor. The suspect is armed and extremely dangerous. Static answered her. The radio was dead. Dr. Wells started to speak, but Sarah held up her hand for silence. In the distance, she could hear what sounded like classical music, a piano sonata echoing from somewhere deeper in the facility. The melody was hauntingly beautiful and completely out of place in the current situation. Sarah's phone buzzed with another text. Chopin's Funeral March seemed appropriate for the occasion. I do hope you appreciate the artistry, Detective Chen. The footsteps resumed, but now they seemed to be coming from multiple directions. Sarah realized with growing horror that the emergency exits might be blocked, trapping everyone inside with a killer who knew the facility's layout better than they did. Dr. Wells, she whispered, is there another way out of this building? The service elevator at the east end of the hallway leads directly to the parking garage, but it requires a security card. Give me your card. Dr. Wells fumbled in her pocket, her hands shaking as she handed over the access card. Sarah checked her weapon, 15 rounds in the magazine, 1 in the chamber. She prayed it would be enough. They moved slowly toward the east corridor, Sarah leading with her weapon drawn. The music grew louder as they walked, and she began to make out words. Someone was singing along with the piano in a clear, beautiful voice. Lacrimosa, diesia que resurgit ex favilla judicandus. Homo Reus, Latin, the dies irae, the day of wrath from Mozart's Requiem. Sarah had heard it at her grandfather's funeral years ago, but the words sounded different now, more threatening, more personal. The service elevator was just ahead when Sarah heard Dr. Wells gasp behind her. She turned to see the doctor staring at something on the wall, a series of photographs that hadn't been there before. 8 children's faces, arranged in a neat row. The missing victims from the 1980s. But there was a 9th photograph now, positioned at the end of the row. Sarah's own driver's license photo, blown up and mounted like a portrait. He's been planning this for a long time, Dr. Wells whispered. Sarah pressed the call button for the elevator, but nothing happened. She tried Dr. Wells' security card on the access panel, but the red light continued to blink mockingly. A new text arrived on her phone. I'm afraid the elevator is temporarily out of service, Detective. But don't worry, I have something much more interesting planned for you. The singing stopped abruptly, leaving only silence. Sarah strained to hear any sound that might indicate where the killer was hiding, but the facility had become as quiet as a tomb. Then she heard it, a child's voice calling out from somewhere below them. Help me, please, somebody help me. Sarah's training told her it was a trap, but her instincts as a police officer wouldn't let her ignore a child in distress. She motioned for Dr. Wells and the others to stay put while she investigated. The main stairwell was pitch black, forcing Sarah to use her phone's flashlight to navigate. The child's voice called out again, more desperate now. I'm scared. I can't find my way out. The voice seemed to be coming from the first floor, near what Dr. Wells had described as the recreational therapy wing. Sarah descended slowly, her weapon ready, every sense alert for an ambush. The first floor hallway was lined with wheelchairs and medical equipment, creating a maze of shadows and potential hiding places. Sarah moved carefully, checking each alcove and doorway as she followed the sound of crying. She found the source in the facility's chapel, a small room with stained glass windows and wooden pews. But instead of a child, Sarah discovered an old cassette player sitting on the altar, playing a loop of recorded cries for help. A note was propped against the player. Did you really think I would be so crude as to use an actual child as bait? I prefer more sophisticated methods. Sarah spun around, but the chapel was empty. Her phone buzzed. Look up, Detective. She raised her flashlight toward the ceiling and saw words carved into the wooden beam above the altar. The sins of the fathers shall be visited upon the children. Another message arrived. Your cousin Tommy was a beautiful child, Detective Chen. He reminded me so much of my own son at that age. It's a pity you never got to meet him properly. The psychological warfare was working. Sarah could feel her composure cracking, her professional detachment giving way to personal rage. This monster had killed her family member, had tortured and murdered 8 children, and was now playing games with her. But that's exactly what he wanted for her, to lose control, to make mistakes. Sarah forced herself to think rationally. Dr. Jonathan Blackwood was a psychiatrist, trained in manipulation and psychological pressure. He understood how to push people to their breaking point, But he also had weaknesses. He was theatrical, egotistical, and clearly enjoyed the attention his games brought him. She could use that against him. Sarah turned off her phone's flashlight and moved silently back toward the stairwell, using the emergency lighting to guide her. If Blackwood was monitoring her movements through security cameras, she needed to become unpredictable. Instead of returning to the third floor where she'd left Dr. Wells, Sarah headed for the basement. Every old building had secrets hidden in its lower levels, and she suspected that's where she'd find the real Dr. Jonathan Blackwood. The basement was a labyrinth of maintenance tunnels, storage rooms, and mechanical equipment. The air was thick with the smell of old pipes and industrial cleaning supplies. Sarah moved slowly, her weapon drawn, listening for any sound that might reveal her quarry's location. She found what she was looking for in a room, marked electrical, authorized personnel only. Banks of monitors showed feeds from security cameras throughout the facility, and in the center of the room sat a man in his 50s, perfectly dressed in an expensive suit despite the late hour. Dr. Jonathan Blackwood looked exactly like what he was: a successful psychiatrist with silver hair, intelligent eyes, and the kind of confident bearing that inspired trust in patients and colleagues alike. He was the sort of man parents would feel comfortable leaving their troubled children with, never suspecting the monster that lurked beneath the professional facade. He didn't seem surprised to see her. "Detective Chen, right on time. I was beginning to worry you'd lost your way." Sarah kept her weapon trained on him, but maintained her distance. "Dr. Jonathan Blackwood, you're under arrest for the murders of Emily Morrison, Tommy Chen, Maria Santos, David and Daniel Patterson, Rebecca Walsh, Sophie Brennan, and Michael Delacroix." Blackwood smiled, an expression of genuine amusement. You have been thorough. Though I think you're forgetting someone. Your Uncle Edmund." "Oh no, Detective. Uncle Edmund died of natural causes, I assure you. His heart simply gave out from the excitement of knowing his life's work would continue. I'm referring to someone much more recent." Sarah's blood chilled. "Who?" "Dr. Patricia Wells, of course. Such a lovely woman, but she asked too many questions when I arrived this afternoon. I'm afraid she had to be silenced." The realization hit Sarah like a physical blow. The woman she'd left upstairs with the coroner's team wasn't Dr. Wells at all. It was an accomplice, someone working with Blackwood to orchestrate this elaborate trap. "You see, Detective, I've had 35 years to perfect my uncle's methods. He was brilliant but crude, relying on brute force and intimidation. I prefer psychological manipulation. It's so much more elegant." Sarah's radio crackled to life suddenly, startling her. "Detective Chen, this is dispatch. We have multiple units responding to your location. ETA 3 minutes. Blackwood's smile never wavered. "I'm afraid your backup won't be coming, Detective. That's my associate upstairs, using Dr. Wells' radio. She's quite talented at mimicking voices, a skill that's proven useful in luring children away from their families over the years." The trap was even more elaborate than Sarah had realized. Blackwood hadn't just killed his uncle's potential witnesses. He'd been building his own network, recruiting accomplices who could help him expand his hunting grounds. "How many?" Sarah asked, though she dreaded the answer. "Children, oh, dozens by now. We've been quite busy since the 1980s. Uncle Edmund's work in Millbrook was just the beginning. My associate and I have traveled extensively small towns across the Midwest where children disappear and police departments lack the resources for thorough investigations." Sarah's finger tightened on the trigger. "You're done, both of you. Am I? Look around you, detective. I'm in a room full of electronic equipment, including some rather sophisticated explosive devices. One wrong move from you, and this entire building comes down. All those elderly residents upstairs, trapped in their beds, crushed beneath tons of concrete and steel. For the first time, Sarah noticed the blinking red lights attached to various pieces of equipment around the room. Blackwood hadn't just been monitoring the facility, he'd been rigging it for destruction. You're bluffing, am I? Tell me, detective. What's the difference between killing 8 children and killing 80 elderly residents? From my perspective, it's simply a matter of scale. Sarah realized she was dealing with a level of evil she'd never encountered before. This wasn't just a serial killer. It was someone who viewed human lives as nothing more than pieces in an elaborate game. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Sarah, this is the real Dr. Wells. I escaped through the kitchen service. Entrance. Building is surrounded by real police. Don't let him detonate those bombs. Hope flared in Sarah's chest, but she didn't dare look away from Blackwood to read the message fully. Your game is over, she said firmly. The building is surrounded. You have nowhere to run. Blackwood laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Run. My dear detective, I have no intention of running. This was always meant to be the final act, the grand finale that would cement my legacy forever. His hand moved toward a device on the desk, a simple black box with a single red button. The only question now is whether you'll be remembered as the detective who solved the Millbrook murders, or as the woman whose incompetence led to the greatest mass casualty event in the city's history. Time slowed to a crawl as Sarah watched. Blackwood's hand inched toward the detonator. The red button seemed to pulse with malevolent energy, and she could see the triumph in his eyes. This was what he'd been building toward all along. Not just murder, but the ultimate expression of his power over life and death. You have 10 seconds to decide, Detective Chen. Drop your weapon and submit to restraint, or watch 80 innocent people die because of your stubbornness. Sarah's mind raced through her options. She could shoot Blackwood, but his dying reflexes might trigger the explosives. She could try to tackle him, but he was too far away to reach before he could press the button. She could surrender, but that would only give him time to kill her and detonate the bombs anyway. 5 seconds, Detective. Then Sarah remembered something from her training at the police academy. A lecture on hostage negotiation that had seemed boring at the time, but now might save dozens of lives. Wait, she said, lowering her weapon slightly. Before you do this, I need to know something. Why children? What made you choose them as victims? Blackwood paused, his hand hovering over the detonator. Sarah had correctly identified his weakness, the narcissistic need to explain his actions, to be understood and appreciated for his twisted brilliance. Children are pure, detective, uncorrupted by the lies and compromises that define adult existence. When you destroy that purity, you're not just ending a life, you're preventing the possibility of innocence in the world. It's the ultimate act of power. Sarah took a small step closer, keeping her weapon trained on him, but not in an immediately threatening position. But your uncle's victims fought back. Emily Morrison scratched him. Tommy Chun tried to run. That must have been disappointing, finding out that children aren't as pure as you thought. Uncle Edmund was crude, Blackwood replied, his voice taking on the tone of a professor lecturing a student. He relied on physical force, which naturally provoked resistance. My methods are far more sophisticated. I begin with therapy sessions, earning trust, identifying psychological vulnerabilities. By the time I'm ready to act, my victims come willingly. They trust me completely. Another step closer. Sarah could see the sweat beading on Blackwood's forehead despite his confident demeanor. He was nervous, which meant he wasn't as in control as he wanted her to believe. How many children have you killed using these methods? 43, not counting Uncle Edmund's 8. Each one a perfect specimen, chosen for maximum psychological impact on their families and communities. Sarah felt sick, but she forced herself to keep talking. And your associate upstairs. She helps you select victims. Dr. Rebecca Walsh has been invaluable. She has such a gift for identifying vulnerable children, ones who won't be missed immediately. Foster children, runaways, the children of addicts, and criminals. The name hit Sarah like a physical blow. Rebecca Walsh, one of the victims from the 1980s. But she'd been 5 years old when she disappeared. Unless Rebecca Walsh didn't die in 1987, did she? Blackwood's smile widened. Very good, Detective. You're beginning to understand the scope of our operation. Little Rebecca was our first successful recruitment. Uncle Edmund was going to kill her like the others, but I convinced him that a living witness could be more useful than a dead one. We kept her, trained her, shaped her into the perfect accomplice. She's been helping us hunt children for over 30 years. The horror of it was almost incomprehensible. A 5-year-old victim twisted and molded into a monster over decades of abuse and manipulation. Rebecca Walsh hadn't just survived her kidnapping. She'd been transformed into a weapon against other children. Where is she now? Still upstairs. I imagine playing her role as the concerned Dr. Wells. She's quite convincing. Years of therapy have given her remarkable insight into human psychology. She knows exactly what people want to hear. Sarah was close enough now to make a move, but she needed to distract Blackwood for just a few more seconds. You said 43 victims. That's a very precise number. Do you keep trophies? Oh, yes. Each child is photographed at the moment of death. The expressions are quite remarkable. The transition from trust to understanding to terror to acceptance. I've been thinking of publishing a book about the psychological aspects of that transformation. That was it. Sarah had heard enough. In one fluid motion, she dove forward, knocking the detonator from Blackwood's hand and sending it skittering across the floor. He lunged after it, but Sarah tackled him, both of them crashing into the bank of monitors. Blackwood was stronger than he looked, and desperation gave him additional power. He managed to break free from Sarah's grip and scrambled toward the fallen detonator. Sarah drew her weapon and aimed, but hesitated. A stray bullet could hit the explosive devices and trigger the very disaster she was trying to prevent. Blackwood's fingers closed around the detonator. You're too late, Detective. He pressed the button. Nothing happened. Sarah smiled for the first time that night. Dr. Wells, the real Dr. Wells. She's an electrical engineer. Used to work for the military before she went into healthcare administration. She had the building's power grid shut down 20 minutes ago. Your bombs are just expensive paperweights now. The look of shock and rage on Blackwood's face was worth every terrifying moment of the past few hours. For the first time in his life, his perfect plan had failed. It's over, Sarah said, keeping her weapon trained on him as she pulled out her handcuffs. Dr. Jonathan Blackwood, you're under arrest for multiple counts of murder, kidnapping, and conspiracy. You have the right to remain silent. As she read him his rights, Sarah could hear the sound of real police sirens approaching the building. Backup was finally on the way, but there was still one more monster to catch. The woman who had been impersonating Dr. Wells was gone by the time the SWAT team secured the building. She'd vanished sometime during Sarah's confrontation with Blackwood, leaving behind only a note written in childish handwriting. "I'm sorry for what I became, but I was only 5 years old when they took me. I didn't know how to be anything else." Rebecca Sarah found a note on the real Dr. Wells' desk as dawn broke over Millbrook. The genuine Dr. Wells was alive but shaken, having spent hours hiding in a maintenance closet after escaping her captors. The elderly residents had been evacuated safely, though many were traumatized by the night's events. Detective Chen, Captain Rodriguez, appeared in the doorway, looking exhausted but relieved. "How are you holding up?" "I've been better," Sarah, slumped in the desk chair, the weight of the investigation finally catching up with her. "Has Blackwood said anything?" "Not a word," lawyered up immediately. "But we found his private practice. It's a house of horrors. Photographs, recordings, detailed journals documenting every murder. The FBI is taking over the case now." Sarah nodded absently. She'd known this would happen. A case this large and complex would quickly move beyond the jurisdiction of a small-town police department. But she felt oddly empty at the prospect of handing over the investigation that had consumed her life. "For the past week, there's something else," Rodriguez continued. "We found financial records linking Blackwood to similar practices in 7 other states. This wasn't just about Millbrook, it was a network. The FBI thinks there might be dozens of other victims." The scope of the horror was almost impossible to comprehend. 43 confirmed victims, with potentially dozens more scattered across the country. And somewhere out there, Rebecca Walsh was still alive, still dangerous, still carrying the psychological scars of her own victimization. "Captain, I want to stay involved in the manhunt for Rebecca Walsh." Rodriguez shook her head. "Sarah, you've been through enough. Take some time off, see the department's psychologist, let someone else handle the cleanup." "No," Sarah's voice was firm. "Rebecca Walsh is a victim too, even if she became a perpetrator. She's been manipulated and abused for over 30 years. If anyone can reach her, convince her to surrender peacefully, it might be me." "Why do you think that?" Sarah pulled out the cassette tapes, which had been returned to her after being processed. "As evidence? Because I understand what it's like to be haunted by the dead. These children have been speaking to me through Father Delacroix's confessions. Rebecca has been living with their ghosts even longer than I have." Rodriguez studied her detective's face, noting the dark circles under her eyes, the tremor in her hands from too much caffeine and too little sleep. "If I let you stay on this case, you work with a partner. No more lone wolf investigating." "Agreed." "And you see the department shrink. This case has gotten under your skin in ways that worry me." Sarah wanted to argue, but she knew Rodriguez was right. The investigation had become personal in ways that went beyond professional duty. Tommy Chun's death had awakened something in her, a need for justice that bordered on obsession. "There's one more thing," Rodriguez said, pulling out a manila folder. "We ran DNA on the remains found at St. Agatha's. Emily Morrison's DNA matched perfectly, but we found something else. Hair follicles that don't belong to any of the known victims." Sarah opened the folder and found lab results indicating the presence of DNA from an unknown female, approximately 5 years old at the time of death. "Rebecca Walsh, that's what we think. Somehow, some of her hair got mixed in with the other. Evidence when Blackwood and his uncle were disposing of bodies. It proves she was there, but it also proves she survived when the others didn't. The implications were staggering." Rebecca Walsh had been present for multiple murders, had watched other children die, had somehow been spared only to be transformed into an instrument of evil. The psychological damage must have been unimaginable. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I saw the news reports. Dr. Blackwood is in custody. You did well, Detective Chen. The message was signed with a single initial, R. She's still watching, Sarah murmured, showing the text to Rodriguez. Can we trace it? I doubt it. She's had 30 years to learn how to stay invisible. Sarah paused, considering her next move. But maybe I don't need to trace it. Maybe I can convince her to come to me. Rodriguez raised an eyebrow. What are you thinking? I'm thinking Rebecca Walsh has been running and hiding for decades. She's tired, alone, and probably terrified now that her partner is in custody. She reached out to me once. Maybe do it again. Sarah typed a careful response. Rebecca, I know you're scared. I know you're alone. But you don't have to keep running. I want to help you. The reply came within minutes. You can't help me, detective. I'm too far gone, too damaged, too guilty. Everyone deserves a chance at redemption. Even you. I helped kill children. I helped destroy families. There's no redemption for someone like me. Sarah felt tears welling in her eyes as she typed her response. You were 5 years old when they took you. You were a victim too. Whatever you became afterward wasn't your choice. A long pause, then, I remember being 5. I remember my real name, my real family. But that little girl died in the church basement 35 years ago. What's left is just a monster wearing her face. That's not true, Rebecca. The fact that you remember her, that you mourn her, proves she's still alive inside you. It's not too late to honor her memory by doing the right thing. Another pause, longer this time. If I surrender, will you promise me something, Detective Chen? What? Will you make sure the families know the truth? All of it. They deserve to understand what really happened to their children. Sarah's tears fell freely now. Despite everything Rebecca Walsh had done, despite the horrors she'd participated in, somewhere deep inside was still a 5-year-old girl who wanted to go home. I promise, Sarah typed. Then I'll surrender to you, but only you, tomorrow at noon. At the place where it all began, you'll know where to find me. The conversation ended there, leaving Sarah alone with the weight of a promise she wasn't sure she could keep. St. Agatha's Church looked different in the morning light. Its Gothic architecture softened by the golden October sun. The construction crews had been sent away for the day, leaving only the skeletal remains of what had once been a sacred space. The walls stood like broken teeth against the sky, exposing the basement where so many horrors had taken place. Sarah arrived early, positioning herself where she could watch all the entrances while remaining hidden from view. She'd argued with Captain Rodriguez for an hour about coming alone, but in the end, she'd convinced him that a show of force would only drive Rebecca Walsh deeper underground. The backup teams were positioned 3 blocks away, ready to respond. If things went wrong, Sarah wore a wire and carried a GPS tracker, but she knew that if Rebecca wanted to hurt her, technology wouldn't save her life. At exactly noon, a figure emerged from the shadows of the old church. Sarah barely recognized the woman who had impersonated Dr. Wells the night before. Gone was the professional appearance and confident demeanor. In their place was someone who looked haunted, broken, aged beyond her years by decades of guilt and trauma. Rebecca Walsh was 38 years old, but she moved like an elderly woman, her shoulders hunched with the weight of terrible secrets. Her hair was prematurely grey, her face lined with stress, her eyes holding a depth of pain that made Sarah's heart ache. "Detective Chen," Rebecca's voice was barely above a whisper. "Thank you for coming alone. Thank you for reaching out." Sarah kept her weapon holstered but ready, despite her sympathy for Rebecca's situation. She couldn't forget that this woman had helped murder dozens of children. They stood in the ruins of the church nave, surrounded by broken pews and shattered stained glass. The basement entrance yawned like a wound in the floor, sealed off with police tape that fluttered in the breeze. "I remember this place," Rebecca said, staring at the basement stairs. "This is where I died the first time, where that 5-year girl named Rebecca Walsh ceased to exist. What happened to you here?" Rebecca's eyes focused on something only she could see. "Uncle Edmund brought me here on a Sunday after service. He said he wanted to show me something special in the basement. I trusted him. He was a doctor, a pillar of the community. My foster parents thought it was wonderful that such an important man was taking interest in me." She walked closer to the basement entrance, and Sarah tensed, ready to react if Rebecca tried to flee. The basement was full of children's things: toys, clothes, photographs. I thought it was some kind of playroom at first, but then I saw the other children, the ones who were already dead. Rebecca nodded, tears streaming down her face. Emily Morrison was there. Tommy Chen, the Patterson twins. They were arranged like dolls in a circle, all dressed in their Sunday best. Uncle Edmund made me sit with them while he took pictures. Sarah felt sick imagining the scene, but she forced herself to listen. He told me I had two choices. I could join my friends permanently, or I could help him make sure no other children would have to suffer alone. He said if I helped him, I could save other children from experiencing the fear and pain that my friends had endured. The manipulation was brilliant in its cruelty. Edmund Blackwood had taken a traumatized child and convinced her that participating in future murders was an act of mercy. "How old were you when you helped with your first kill?" 7. A little boy named Marcus, who had been asking too many questions about the missing children. I lured him to the church by telling him I knew where they were hiding. I was just trying to save him from dying alone and afraid, like the others had. Rebecca's voice broke completely, and she collapsed onto a pile of rubble, sobbing with the force of decades of suppressed guilt. I told myself I was helping them, making it easier, making it quick and painless instead of drawn out and terrifying. But it was really just helping the monsters hunt more efficiently. Sarah approached slowly, her hand extended in a gesture of comfort. "Rebecca, you were a child yourself. They brainwashed you, manipulated you into believing their lies. You're as much a victim as anyone they killed." "No." Rebecca's voice was firm through her tears. "I had choices. As I got older, I understood what was really happening. But I kept helping because I was too afraid to stop. Too afraid to face what I'd become. It's not too late to stop now." Rebecca looked up at Sarah with eyes full of desperate hope. "Do you really believe that? Do you think there's any chance of redemption for someone like me?" Sarah knelt beside her, close enough to smell the fear and exhaustion that clung to Rebecca like a shroud. "I think you've been punishing yourself for 30 years. I think you've carried the guilt for crimes that were committed against you as much as by you. And I think the fact that you're here, willing to face justice, proves that the little girl they tried to destroy is still alive inside you." "I can give you everything," Rebecca whispered. "Names, locations, evidence. There are 43 families who deserve to know what happened to their children. I can help you find the bodies, explain how they died, provide closure. In exchange for what? Nothing. I don't want a deal. I don't want leniency. I just want the families to have peace. And I want to make sure Jonathan never hurts another child. Sarah helped Rebecca to her feet. There's something you should know. We found evidence that Dr. Blackwood has been operating in other states. The FBI thinks there might be a network of people like him. Rebecca's face went pale. There are others. Jonathan trained apprentices, just like Uncle Edmund trained him. The network spans the entire country. Detective, what you've uncovered in Millbrook is just one small piece of a much larger horror. The implications were staggering. If Rebecca was telling the truth, they weren't dealing with isolated incidents, but with an organized conspiracy of child killers operating on a national scale. I can help you find them, Rebecca continued. I know their methods, their communication systems, their recruitment techniques, but I'll only work with you, Detective Chen. You're the only one who's treated me like a human being instead of just a monster. Sarah made her decision. Rebecca Walsh, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, accessory to murder, and kidnapping. You have the right to remain silent. As she read Rebecca her rights and applied the handcuffs, Sarah felt an overwhelming mixture of relief and sorrow. The immediate threat was over, but the larger horror was just beginning to reveal itself. The Millbrook murders weren't an ending. They were just the first chapter in a much darker story. 3 months later, Sarah sat in a windowless conference room at FBI headquarters in Quantico, surrounded by evidence boxes, crime scene photographs, and maps dotted with red pins representing confirmed victims across 12 states. The Blackwood Network, as the media had dubbed it, was proving to be even more extensive than Rebecca Walsh had initially revealed. Agent David Martinez, the lead FBI investigator, spread out a series of photographs on the conference table. Each showed a different man or woman, but they all shared certain characteristics: professional appearances, positions of trust within their communities, and access to vulnerable children. Rebecca's cooperation has been invaluable, Martinez said, his voice tight with exhaustion. In the past 90 days, we've identified 17 active members of the network and arrested 12 of them. The other 5 appear to have gone underground. Sarah studied the photographs, committing each face to memory. Dr. Margaret Foster, a pediatrician in Ohio. Reverend Thomas Bailey, a youth pastor in Texas. Principal Elizabeth Cormier, an elementary school administrator in Oregon. All of them had been recruited and trained by either Edmund or Jonathan Blackwood. All of them had used their positions to identify and prey upon vulnerable children. What's the total victim count now? Sarah asked, though she dreaded the answer. 143 confirmed dead, 57 still missing, presumed dead, and we're finding new cases every day as we expand the investigation. The numbers were almost incomprehensible. 200 children murdered over the course of 35 years by a network of predators who had hidden in plain sight within their communities. Rebecca's been working with our psychological profiling team, Martinez continued. She's helping us understand how the network operated, how they communicated with each other, how they selected and groomed victims. Her insight has been crucial in tracking down the surviving members. Sarah nodded, but her thoughts were elsewhere. She'd visited Rebecca twice since her arrest, watching as the woman slowly began to reclaim pieces of her humanity. With proper psychiatric care and medication, Rebecca was starting to resemble the person she might have been if her childhood hadn't been stolen by monsters. "There's something else," Martinez said, pulling out a thick file. Rebecca mentioned that the network kept extensive records, photographs, videos, psychological profiles of victims. They saw themselves as conducting research into the nature of human suffering. "We found Jonathan Blackwood's archive, but Rebecca insists there's a central repository somewhere, containing evidence from the entire network. Any idea where?" "She thinks it's hidden in the original Blackwood family property, a compound in the Adirondack Mountains that's been in the family for generations. We're organizing a raid for next week." Sarah's phone buzzed with a text message. The sender was listed as unknown, but she recognized the writing style immediately. "Detective Chen, I've been thinking about our conversations. There's something I never told you about the compound, something that might be important. Can we talk?" Sarah showed the message to Martinez, who frowned. "She's not supposed to have access to outside communications. She's in protective custody." "This isn't from the jail." The message came from outside. Martinez immediately called for a security check on Rebecca's location. The response came back within minutes. Rebecca Walsh was still in her cell, accounted for and under constant observation, which meant someone else was using her communication methods. "It's a trap," Sarah said, her blood running cold. "One of the network members is trying to lure us away from Rebecca or into an ambush." Martinez was already coordinating with his team, requesting additional security for Rebecca, and alerting field agents to the possibility of network members attempting to interfere with the investigation. Sarah's phone buzzed again. "You're too late, Detective. The network is bigger than you know, and we have people everywhere, even in your precious FBI." A chill ran down Sarah's spine. If the network had infiltrated law enforcement, then everything they'd been working toward could be compromised. "Agent Martinez, I think we need to consider the possibility that the network has been monitoring our investigation from the inside." Martinez's face went pale. "You think we have a mole?" "I think we have to assume we do. The network has been operating for 35 years without being caught. That level of operational security requires inside information about law enforcement activities." As if summoned by their conversation, Agent Jennifer Walsh entered the conference room. Sarah noticed for the first time how much the agent resembled Rebecca. The same bone structure, the same eyes, the same nervous mannerisms. "Agent Walsh," Martinez said, "we need to discuss security protocols for the compound raid." Jennifer Walsh smiled, but there was something cold in her expression that made Sarah's hand move instinctively toward her weapon. "Actually," Agent Walsh said, closing the conference room door behind her, "I think we need to discuss something else entirely." She pulled out a service weapon and aimed it directly at Sarah's chest. "My sister Rebecca has been far too helpful. With your investigation, Detective Chen, the network invested too much time and effort in her training to let her be turned into a government witness." Sarah's mind raced as the pieces fell into place. Rebecca Walsh had a sister, someone who'd been recruited into the network separately, someone who'd risen through the ranks of law enforcement while maintaining her cover as a dedicated federal agent. "Jennifer Walsh," Sarah said slowly, "you're Rebecca's sister, twin sister, actually. Rebecca and I were separated when we were taken from our foster home. The network found it useful to have us develop along different paths. Rebecca as a field operative, me as an intelligence asset within law enforcement." Martinez reached for his weapon, but Jennifer was faster, swinging her gun toward him. I wouldn't, David. I've been feeding information to the network for the past 15 years. Every raid you've planned, every safe house location, every witness, protection detail, all of it has been compromised from the beginning. The full scope of the betrayal was staggering. The network hadn't just been staying ahead of law enforcement through luck and caution. They'd been actively manipulated and misdirected by someone on the inside. The compound raid, Sarah realized. It's another trap. Jennifer smiled again, and this time Sarah could see the similarity to Rebecca's expressions, but where Rebecca's face showed guilt and remorse, Jennifer's showed only cold satisfaction. The compound is real, and it does contain the network's archives, but it's also heavily defended and designed to eliminate anyone who tries to access those files without proper authorization. Your FBI raid team will walk into a killing ground. Why are you telling us this? Because I want you to understand the scope of what you're fighting, Detective Chen. The network isn't just a group of individual predators. It's an organization with resources, connections, and a long-term vision. We've spent decades infiltrating law enforcement, social services, the legal system. We don't just hunt children, we control the very systems designed to protect them. Jennifer's revelation painted a picture of evil so comprehensive and systematic that Sarah felt physically ill. The network hadn't just been killing children, they'd been corrupting the institutions meant to safeguard society's most vulnerable members. What do you want? Sarah asked. I want you to call off the raid and turn Rebecca over to me. In exchange, I'll give you 48 hours to evacuate your families and disappear before the network comes for you. And if we refuse, Jennifer's smile disappeared entirely. Then you'll join the 200 children whose deaths you've been investigating, Detective Chen. The only difference is that your death will be broadcast live to every network member across the country as an example of what happens to those who interfere with our work. The conference room fell silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights overhead. Sarah could feel Martinez tense beside her, preparing to make a move despite the gun pointed at his chest. But before anyone could act, the lights went out, plunging them into complete darkness. In the blackness, Sarah heard Jennifer Wash's voice, now tinged with panic. That's not supposed to happen. Then came another voice, one Sarah recognized immediately. Hello, sister. Rebecca Walsh had come to settle accounts with the network that had destroyed both their lives. The final confrontation was about to begin.